So we are the final panel session now, and it's a good one. It's all been good content today. Can we get my panelists to the stage? We have Sean, Tadhg, Hubert. There you go, sir. It's been a while. It's good to see you. I'm sorry a bit late, Jim and everybody, but we are gonna. You've got your full time. Don't worry. There's nothing after you. You're gonna have to stop at some point because there'll be an afternoon sessions, but you've probably got a good hour. You can go to 40 minutes. So I understand you're gonna lead off. And we're going to be talking up here about all of the different stuff we have covered, maybe stuff we haven't covered already. What are the fads, or what are the things that are here to stay in terms of trends? So I'll hand over to you. You can use that, or you can use that. It's up to you.
I'm more of a doo kind of.
Okay, fair enough. Dooby then. Off you go.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for being patient. Obviously, we have a lot to get through today, and we already have had a lot to get through this morning. I'm Tadhg Kelly. I'm the head of operations at Mobile Game Doctor, which is a game design consultancy, which is mostly remote, somewhat based in San Francisco. And we work an awful lot with developers all through both mobile, increasingly, and other sort of and more interesting and exotic platforms like some XR work and some work in Web3, blockchain-y sort of stuff, and all that kind of thing. But I'm not here to talk about me today. I'm actually here to quiz these fine gentlemen about their opinions on the fad or future, which you might say is looking at kind of key trends in the industry and key things that are upcoming and all that sort of stuff. What do they think? Do they think that they have legs? Do they think that there's nothing to them? Do they think they might, be the future of the industry, or that they might kind of pop and fade? And I think I'm going to try and make the session a little interactive because it's almost lunchtime and we're all a bit tired. So when we go through each topic, I'm going to ask you all for a show of hands, whether you think you're convinced or not, whether you think that it's all fad or future. Okay, fun? I'm making a game of it, yes. So let me introduce our panelists first. And I'm going to just give a brief intro and then ask them to speak about their own experiences more. So Hubert Shin is the CTPO, Chief Technology and Product Officer, is that correct? At NPX, a renowned expert in technology and product development.
Hi, my name is Hubert. I'm a Chief Technology Product Officer at NPX. NPX group has two different pillars. I need to explain this first because so that I can explain further about what we are trying to achieve. NPX has two different pillars. One is NFTs Capital, which is a venture studio based in 4 different locations. One is USA, Seoul, Singapore, and Southeast Asia. And we support commercialization capability through technology and product development, as well as seed funding for pioneering entrepreneurs. And also the other pillar is NFTs Capital, which is a alternative investment fund that supports entrepreneurs and companies through like all stages of growth, from the early stage to buyout. These two actually can make a good synergy. Synergy fostered creating an ecosystem that benefits our investment and then acquisition through capital, operations, technology, and product development. That's pretty much about me, myself, and the company.
Great. And then Jim Ying is the Managing Director and Head of CVCapital's Digital Entertainment and Mobile Practice.
All right, so Jim Ying, So at CVCapital, we're an investment bank primarily focused on late-stage investment and M&A advisory in games and ad tech. Basically, we help companies that are looking to raise or sell their company. Over the last 2 years, you guys have seen how active things have been in the gaming ecosystem. So we advised Housemarque on their sale to Sony PlayStation. We advised Appy Nation on their sale to Miniclip. We advised Arky on their sale to Skills. We did raises for Behavior and Skybound Entertainment down in LA. My personal background, I've been in games for 15 years, mostly on the product management marketing side, but then gradually transitioned over to the publishing and investment M&A side of things.
And then Sean Keith, who I met earlier this morning and is a lovely individual, is the Senior Director of Business Development at Mythical, which is a next generation game technology studio creating universal economies driven by player ownership of NFTs and utility.
Okay. Yeah. Sean Keith, everyone, Senior Director of Business Development, Mythical Games. Thank you for that intro. Kind of in a nutshell, what Mythical Games does is enables internal and external developers to build games that utilize NFTs vis-a-vis our SDK. So if you're a game developer that is interested in putting NFTs, and we'll get into what NFTs really are and what utility is, if you're interested in putting NFTs into your game, we have a solution for you that is easy to use. So
Cool. I think that's an excellent kickoff point for my first topic, which is, of course, because it's really unavoidable these days. It has been the year of crypto. It's been the year of NFTs. It's an extremely divisive topic in the industry for a variety of pretty well understood reasons. It's increasingly being called Web3 gaming as well, because people are trying to be a bit more, I think, embracing rather than talking about the specific token technology. Nevertheless, it's a huge open question as to what will happen with this whole sphere. Is it going to essentially be the next free to play, for example, or is it going to be something that's maybe a little smaller? So I would love your takes. Sean, since you're directly working in it, I'd love to take your initial bit.
sure. Well, is it a fad or is it here to stay? I think it's here to stay. So a little bit of background first. Blockchain is not necessarily new. Recently, a lot of people have been paying attention to it, but Bitcoin was created in 2009. Ethereum was deployed in 2015. One of the OG NFT collections, CryptoPunks, was actually deployed in 2017. So blockchain NFTs have actually been around for a while. Now, in the last 2 years, and especially the last year, there's been a lot of attention towards it. And not always for the right reasons, in my opinion, but the fact is that what blockchain and NFTs are, it's the ability for you to own your digital assets. Now, how many people here are gamers? Okay, good, most of you, right? How many people here have spent thousands of dollars and probably thousands of hours on games? Okay, good, it's a good amount. So with all that investment in terms of time and money into your games, as long as the game is fun and the content is good, would you prefer a game that you own the assets and you could potentially sell them or do what you will with them? Or a game where all your assets are locked to your account and you don't really own them, you're just licensing those assets? And I think, in a nutshell, the very core of what we're doing is we're enabling people, NFTs are enabling people to own their digital assets. And I think that's powerful, especially with the younger generation where they spend more time establishing digital identities than they do hanging out with their friends in the real world. So let's give them ownership of their digital assets. They can choose what they want to do with it. They just keep it in their accounts like they do anyways now, that's fine. Or if they want to sell it, or if they want to use it in some other way, that's up to them. So I think for that reason alone, and many other reasons we can get into later, yeah, NFTs and blockchain are here to stay.
Okay. Jen?
I want to caveat all this by saying sometimes I have a terrible ability to predict stuff. So when mobile games first got big, I was a hardcore PC console gamer. I was like, this is stupid. Why would everyone want to play games on such a tiny little screen? And then also when social casino got big, I was at 6 Waves and a company called Tadhg came to us and tried to publish casino games. I was like, this is stupid. Why would anyone want to play casino games or slot machines where you don't get any money? So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I will say here, clearly there's a ton of money flowing into blockchain and crypto. There's a ton of smart people on it. So I'm a firm believer that they're going to figure out some use case for it, right? And the use case that Sean mentioned, like I played World of Warcraft, I played Diablo. The idea that at some point, if the hours and the hundreds of dollars I sunk into those games, that I could transfer that to someone else, very compelling, right? So certain ideas within blockchain and NFT crypto is certainly very compelling. The question is kind of how much of the ecosystem is kind of suck up. Like there's some people out there who are super gung-ho and they're like, everything's going to be blockchain, everything's going to be NFT. Like, I don't think so. Like I think maybe a certain percentage, 10-20% of games where it's going to be relevant, where people do want to sell, trade their items. All right, that's going to be relevant. But I'd say if anything, gaming has skewed, particularly within conferences like this, like the fact that, I don't know, half this conference or maybe even more than 50% is talking about blockchain. And on the investment M&A side, I see how much money is going into these and it's sucking up all the oxygen and all the capital from other deserving developers that are building fun games. And it is very polarizing. That's somewhat a little bit more my concern, right? So like 2-3 years ago, there was a whole ICO wave and like everyone was flooding into ICOs, and ultimately like how much of that actually came to fruition. I think this certainly does have a lot more validity. There are certain use cases. It's just a question of kind of, how much of the ecosystem does that take up relative to kind of what people are
Very
doing.
cool. Yep. Hubert.
Thank you so much for bringing up about the ecosystem thing. I believe Web3 is a technology that we can actually share more benefits to content creators. That's what I see in this market. I need to explain a little bit about concept of webtoon, that's digital comics, which was created in Korea as a term. So our company has a capability of producing 300 high quality webtoon every year, which is really cost efficient. It's 20 times less expensive than drama production, 100 times less expensive than game production. This is the biggest reason why we see a significant increase of webtoon IPs being used to transform to a different media, and especially the K-drama content featured on OTT platform after a huge hit from Squid Games. So what I was trying to explain is, I mean, and also like the universe of webtoon introduced into an interactive game will introduce like whole like different wave of consumers and gamers who have invested in existing IPs for a long time. So there are like a certain stages to become like different format, from the lighter format to the heavier format, starting from web novel, webtoon, and also drama and game. I think there's a connections in between. That's how we call this a transmedia approach. But what we see is like there's a huge gap, because we see unbalance from like a dominant platforms and individual content creators. I think the NFT can be like one of the platforms can be like filling in the gap in between. Well, in my company, last week we tested out the first NFT marketplace for webtoon, and then we sold like about like 100 webtoon art piece for webtoon creators that actually wanted to connect in between webtoon creators and webtoon fans that will create on a certain amount of ecosystem. That way we can incentivize better to our creators. That's one of the things what we can achieve with NFT and blockchain.
So quick straw poll, fad or future? Nobody? Oh, okay, we got one vote. So, okay, I did that wrong. I did that wrong. Fad? We got 1, 2, future. Yep, okay. All right, thank you very much. Well done. Let's move on to the other big tech topic at the moment, which is, of course, everything metaversey, which is a word I think we're all slowly growing to hate to say. But it is kind of become, I guess, the latest sort of umbrella term for what we mean by AR, VR, XR, MR, as well as a lot of kind of connected network technology, as well as the whole thing that Facebook is trying to, or now Meta is trying to kind of bring to the world. Same question, gentlemen. What is your read on what you think of the metaverse kind of project over the next couple of years? Do you think that it's going to work out for Zuckerberg, or do you think maybe not so much?
All right, I'll go first. So I think this is one where, you know, platform success generally is driven either by content or the platform use cases, right? So if you look at, I would draw the most parallels to a console platform. Like the people who are typically playing in VR, they're looking for an immersive experience. They're looking to set aside time. It's not like I'm going to take 5 minutes and, you know, play on my phone. So until there's compelling enough content on the VR side that competes with console and brings it to the next level, people want to make that switch and willing to overcome that barrier of buying the headset and everything. I think it's going to be slow going, right? The alternative is something like mobile phones and mobile phone gaming. It's not like people were buying the mobile phones in order to play the games. It's because mobile phones do calls, they do email, and oh, there's, you know, billions, millions of people happen to have this device that's capable of playing games, and it's super easy for me to download this free game or buy this game for $3, and so that ecosystem blows up. So one of those two things has to happen before AR VR gaming, you know, really catches on. Either someone creates some VR game that's so phenomenal that it drives people to go out and pay $300, $400, $500 to buy this device, or there's some use case like Facebook, like, I don't know, something else, accounting software, where people buy enough VR devices where it's easy enough for a developer to say, hey, pick up this game for $10 because you already have the device, and then everyone starts playing.
Very cool.
So if I think about what kind of metaverse have been successful until now, is only like two verticals. One is entertainment, the other is game. So I think the game changer will happen like when we see like a good success in a different vertical, which I see as like the biggest possibility. One is education. There are three reasons for that. One, metaverse is like the perfect word to experience something. And when we learn something, experiencing thing is like the best way to do it. And then number two is I actually had a very good experiment with my kids last year. I have two daughters, 12-year-old and 10-year-old. 10-year-old. I let them play Roblox for 4 months, and then came up with the idea about content creators. And then I let them learn about economy, that's one. And then software development. And then the marketing and the HR. Like one day they came to me and then said, Dad, I hired 2 people. And then I was like so surprised. How? And then they said, actually, I just gave them like a 14 Robux, which is a really small amount of money. And then they're doing marketing for me now. And then that kind of things I could do. And then I had to teach what is the concept of a minimum wage, you know. So yeah, so I from the experience I learned, this can be a really great game-changing educational way. And then number 3 is we have one of the subsidized company called MPX Point Avenue, which is an international school located in Southeast Asia. And now we can actually do some experiments about the metaverse. And we are forming a team to build that. And we'd like to explore that. We'd like to have some certain amount of achievement out of that. So with these three reasons, I think yeah, as like the next step, we can come up with the educational metaverse.
Okay. All right. So my take on the metaverse, I should kind of define how I view the metaverse first. It doesn't have to be VR. It doesn't have to be AR. I think a lot of people conflate the two because of Ready Player One, the movie, right? And yeah. So my take on the metaverse, actually, you can go back to MUDs in the 90s when you were able to interact with other people in a digital environment. Those days, there was no graphics. It was just ASCII characters. But the fact was that you and someone else were connected digitally, interacting in an environment together. Now, that's kind of a game universe. You take that one level above, which is where the meta comes in. And now you're able to have multiple universes connected, right? And usually with some kind of interoperability, you'll be able to take a digital asset, either your avatar, your items, between these digital experiences. So that's how I kind of view the metaverse. And I also kind of hate the term, especially because it's gotten very popularized because of Ready Player One. But with blockchain, and going back to blockchain, because that's where I work, you can actually kind of enable this. Most games, you can't have interoperability of digital assets because the inventories are siloed. That is to say that they're tied to that game. Other games can't reference like another game's inventories. But if you put inventories or digital assets and you store them on a private permission blockchain or just a blockchain in general, then other developers can also reference these items. And so I think that's very critical, right? You could technically take right now 2 blockchain game experiences on the Ethereum network. And as long as they're referencing Ethereum, they could pull in digital assets to these different experiences, which is delivering on the whole concept of the metaverse. I think it's still early days. A lot of the technological foundations for metaverses are still new. But for example, at Mythical Games, we have a private permission blockchain that all of our developers are building on top of. So we had a wildly successful sale with Burberry, where we sold Burberry avatars based, it looks like a shark called Sharky B. But in the future, sold really well. But in the future, if another developer wanted to say, hey, all of you owners of Sharky B, we can see that you own those assets. We're going to allow you, for example, to have a Burberry car or a Burberry, shield or armor. That is possible because all those developers are building on a common inventory ledger. And so I think those are the foundations of what could be a future metaverse. And we're still early days.
Yeah, let me add a little bit. So the distinction that Sean makes in terms of the metaverse and interconnected world versus AR, VR is a good one, right? So everything I mentioned before, more like the VR, AR side. On the metaverse connecting world side, if you look at whether it's MUDs or Second Life or Roblox now, like it's amazing to me how far along Roblox has come. Like when I was first exposed to it years ago, like they were building this crappy little like build your own world game. But the fact that they now have user generated content and brands and companies are jumping on. I recently saw I think Sega has they're building a Sonic world in it, and then Spotify has a world in it. So in terms of interconnected worlds and people interacting with each other in these worlds, it's so much further, and they've extended much further along than I would have predicted. Because certainly companies like Fortnite, they've done and Epic, they've done concerts, and there's the old Second Life, but Roblox is moving along, and I think it flies under the radar for a lot of people who might be in this ecosystem. Certainly, it did for me because people view it as a kid's game, and because I have 3 little kids, I've seen them play. And I've seen some of the experiences, and even just, I don't know, 6 months ago, these were terrible gaming experiences. Like they were ripping off IP and throwing them in, but it's gotten to the point where it is pretty impressive. And I'd say people should check that out. And I think you can question their rev shares for developers and how sustainable that is, but certainly from a technology and capability and the share mind space that they have for younger kids. And as those folks become teenagers and adults, that they're already familiar with this world and interacting with each other with all the brands. I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Okay, cool. So same question. Do you think metaverse is more fad? Nobody. Ooh, one guy, there he is. Woo! Versus future. Yay, yeah. I suspect I'm going to get a lot of futures on this. But really good answers, really good answers. A lot to think about there. So a third, this is a bit random, I know, but about 3 or 4 years ago, it feels like we were all talking about cloud gaming, right? We were talking about Stadia, we were talking about like that whole kind of world. And then it sort of didn't really work out well, for Google, at least that's the perception. Nevertheless, it seems like a lot of the major kind of platforms are actually still investing an awful lot of money, time, and effort into building their own cloud gaming platforms. Microsoft has a beta running at the moment based on for Xbox. Amazon has Luna, all of that kind of stuff. There's still an awful lot of interest, if you like, at a technical level to try and make cloud gaming work. Do you think it actually will work out though, or do you feel like maybe it won't?
Take a quick first stab at this. So I think 2 things are key for cloud gaming. One is monetization. How do the commercial models actually work for all the parties? That's something that Stadia didn't figure out, something that Xbox kind of has a solution to, but that's like the first thing. If it's going to work, whatever provider is doing it has to figure out commercial terms that work for all the parties. The second part is that gamers like quick experiences. They don't like lag. And with cloud gaming, you invariably have, a decent amount of latency, which is, I think, is an issue, especially in terms of esports or like competitive gaming. So, maybe you could have a bunch of games that are more like first person or like, not competitive games or platformers that would be fine. But I think those are 2 big hurdles that cloud gaming needs to overcome: commercialization, figuring out the latency issue. And I don't know of any solutions yet or compelling solutions that have really jumped on my radar.
I'm a big believer in cloud gaming. So I'd say, yeah, Sean doesn't know what he's talking about.
Your predictions have been wrong, Jim.
I know, that's true. You just gotta establish a firm position and then back it up and you're good to go. So the on-demand live gaming platforms to date, on Live, Stadia, they've been severely inhibited by content, right? They didn't have the capital, they didn't have the content in order to get people to jump their platforms. They didn't have the technology where it addressed the latency issue, right? The companies that are focusing on it now, Sony, Microsoft, they do have the content, right? So that's going to be solved. The technology is improving in terms of having the backend services, including having improving latency because 5G, and the business model from a kind of subscription standpoint, or ultimately you can play cloud gaming and still have IAP. The ability to be able to play anywhere you want and not have to sync $500 into a console, right? So I've tried some of Xbox's cloud gaming experiences either within the house or remotely. And the fact that I can play a AAA console game, and maybe there's a little bit of lag, but a lot of games like RPGs or non-fighting games doesn't really matter, right? Once all of that is there and it's very rapidly moving in that direction, then like, why wouldn't I play cloud gaming if they have the content, as long as, you know, there's not a significant lag?
So I think we're agreeing.
All right.
The content, the latency. Yeah. Okay.
I think the success factor must be about the performance, like you mentioned before. As long as it has, there's a certain amount of expectation met from the users, like console games. Why people are playing console game right now is because of performance. I think that there's a content and then there's performance. Just like metaverse still has a huge dependency on hardware. I think it's a matter of time. I think it's going to be solved, and then people will love it.
You get there. Yeah, good. So, okay, so same question. I keep asking it again and again. Do you think cloud gaming is more of a fad? Nobody. That's really interesting. I thought everybody was going to go, maybe. Or the future. Very cool. Very cool. All right. So the faith is alive. Okay. As a kind of another topic, just kind of related somewhat to that, but more into, I guess, kind of platforms and partnerships and all that kind of stuff. One of the more interesting sort of subtopics that's kind of running through the games industry at the moment is companies like Netflix getting into gaming and actually quite seriously trying to develop kind of gaming kind of wings and like make it a kind of a core part of their strategy. But at the same time, there's a long history in the industry of media companies, particularly trying to get into gaming and for it not to work out. So I kind of wonder what your take is on this modern version of that as a phenomenon. Do you feel like it will go anywhere? Especially, I mean, I know Netflix is obviously in a bit of trouble at the moment with the stock market, but do you think that strategically, structurally, it's got some legs to it? Shin.
Yeah, it comes in waves. Like you look at Disney, they've gotten in and out of games. I don't know how many times, right? They establish some studios, the one game comes out that fails, and then they sell it and they figure they can just license the IP. I think over time, more content companies, so Magic and Wizards of the Coast, they're getting more into games. They recently elevated to CEO Chris Cox, who came over from the game side. Warner's always had a decent sized gaming business that they're moving forward with. Disney is definitely skewing away from. They're on the pendulum. They're just going to license all the IP, and I can understand why, because when you license the IP, it's guaranteed money, right? But then you look at what happened with Marvel, and Marvel, they started out making movies, licensing IP, but ultimately by maintaining creative control and capturing all the economics, the business is much bigger than it could have been, right? So, and I think gaming is getting to a place in common culture where, you know, the gaming IP is relevant IP is going into games, and it does make sense as one of the key pillars of entertainment. Now, specific to Netflix and Google and Facebook, and even I would even bucket Amazon into this, right? When they're coming from another part and there's not a core gaming company, yeah, maybe they hire a couple of gaming people and they make some decisions, but unless they're all in and they have gaming people at the top, then it's going to be very hard for them to succeed. Like Amazon, kudos to them. They've sunk billions and billions of dollars, but they made some really silly decisions in my mind in terms of the direction that they went with in gaming. And my take is because they didn't have enough gaming people at the top making decisions and holding, you know, the chains. The fact that they haven't just gone out as much money as Amazon has, that they haven't just gone out and acquired a bunch of gaming companies seems kind of crazy to me. Mm-hmm. And Netflix is moving in that direction. They've acquired some existing partners. What I hear is that they're going to be potentially acquiring more game studios. That makes sense. If you're going to build out a platform, you want first-party content. Yeah, so I'm still on the fence for Netflix. They're definitely moving in the right direction.
Right.
So yeah, just kind of two things. One, to mirror what Jim said, core competency. These companies need to decide if gaming is going to be one of their core competencies. And the problem is traditionally a lot of media companies, they like the ideas of games, but when they get into actually having to put the money and the resources behind the projects, they balk. So, you know, for free-to-play games, a lot of free-to-play games, they're not profitable for 2-3 years. And only after like year 3, because of a lot of very high user acquisition costs, are they able to start recouping their costs. And if you try explaining that to a media, you know, CEO or VP, because I used to do IP licensing at Fox, they're not excited about spending tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in user acquisition. So it's tough to align the incentives in media organizations. Some can do it, but it takes, like you said, people at the top that really understand games and are willing to go the extra mile. In the case of Netflix, I think it's interesting. Their game team is still pretty small, like all things said. One thing I'm really excited about is that what they're doing is creating multiple touch points for digital assets. So, or IP in this case. You watch a movie, you watch a TV show, then you play the game. It creates a much more sticky ecosystem, which is great. But when things start going south, when you have money to invest, it's okay to put tens, if not like hundreds of millions of dollars into games, kind of like what Apple Arcade did. But then when things start becoming tougher, or maybe you have to tighten the belts a little bit, or your stock price goes down, then suddenly your board's like, well, what do we axe first? And that's where gaming, if it's just a cost center and not a revenue generator, they're going to look at that as maybe we're going to axe that. So I'm also on the fence, but it had, especially in Los Angeles, Disney did their own first party production, got out. Universal did their own first party production, got out. So now we're going to see the same thing kind of with Netflix. And
Okay,
interesting.
More in general, what's happening in the world today is transmedia approach and IP acquisition is we see it as a steep development in the next 12 months, I think. The demand for IP has grown exponentially, and also we see it as like invaluable commodity that with the right amount of right investors and advisors, I think we will see like endless opportunities of growth of transmedia, in addition to maximizing opportunities for content creators. But still, we need a very robust production and development capability. Without it, I don't think we can get to that point yet. So probably it will take a little bit longer time than we expected, but Netflix has been doing extremely great job. So there we get there soon.
Okay. What do we
Let me add one thing. So here's one reason to be bearish on Netflix gaming. So Netflix's gaming model is you're paying for these TV shows, you're paying for these movies, and we're going to throw games into it. And right now, we're going to throw some mobile games into it, right? If you think about the subscription gaming models, the one that I can think of that's successful was Xbox Game Pass, because they have a ton of content. And again, this is one of those things where I first heard it, I was like, why would I pay for a gaming subscription pod? This is stupid. I'm not, it's going to be a failure. But ultimately, Xbox, they had so much content because they have the first party studios and they bought all these other studios along the way. And especially someone like me that I love playing games. I just don't have that much time. I have 3 little kids also. I can just jump around to different games and play some indie games and play like 10 minutes of the next AAA game and say, all right, I played it. You know, that's perfect for me, right? But for Netflix, what is the content that they're going to be able to create that's going to get people to say, all right, I'm going to keep subscribing to Netflix because of this content? And if they start out on the mobile side, I don't know of a single mobile subscription game that's big, right? Maybe there's some smaller ones, but all the subscription games are, you know, PC, you know, MMOs or something like Game Pass. So they really need to ramp up a significant amount of content and compelling content before someone's like, all right, I'm going to either buy Netflix just for the games, or maybe it'll tip me over the edge. Because that's what they're saying they want the games business to do.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So what do you think about Netflix then? Does their adventure into gaming feel like it's a fad? Oh, okay. Interesting. Not so much the future? No? Well, one. All right. So we're 3 futures and 1 fad so far. That's pretty good. Actually, the Game Pass actually leads me into my last kind of major question, which is there has been an awful lot of uptick in subscription services for games. Apple Arcade and Xbox Game Pass are 2 points. But similarly in kind of game giveaways to try and onboard people into games. Like, for example, I don't know about you, but I've built a gigantic PC game library because of the Epic Game Store in the last couple of years. And it feels like it's putting a huge pressure on premium price gaming in general. I wonder, do you feel that the future of premium essentially is kind of on the table, or do you think that we'll end up in a sort of a more balanced ecosystem where it's sort of back catalog is all subscription and premium still exists? Hubert?
Yeah, maybe I can start from here. I was kind of worried when Microsoft started Game Pass approach because I thought like it would be really harmful to bring individual content creators instead of big gigantic players in the market. But I saw recent statistics, and then it was quite interesting to me because the individual creators gained like 4 times more revenue. So that was really, I mean, interesting to see. I think we need to see like what's going to happen like for at least like 2 to 3 years more, so that we can understand what will what kind of influence will hit on the market. Yeah, I'm thinking.
I think it's a good development for indie developers and premium game developers for subscription services. Because otherwise, without that revenue coming in, then the biggest revenue generators are always going to be the free-to-play games, right? And so for people who do want to, make a sustainable life building games, it kind of skews people towards the free-to-play larger games. But if there is a large subscription service out there, similar to Netflix, right? The fact that they're paying for so much content and paying for producers and building more and more niche games because there's an audience out there for it, it supports a larger ecosystem of TV and film producers and game developers. And it's also nice if you look at some of the Asian markets, like whether it's China, Korea, Japan, where you could argue that the gaming markets are either more developed or there's more hardcore gamers. If anything, there's a growth of kind of looking for indie games and premium games because they're kind of tired of playing the free-to-play kind of content-driven games. And so it's nice to have that mix. So I do think that the biggest revenue generators are always going to be the free-to-play games, but there is a nice ecosystem that's going to be maintained for premium developers.
Free-to-play games or NFT-based, scarcity-based economy games. Thank you, Jim. I mean, there's space, I think, for all these different kinds of games and the monetization models, right? When free-to-play came onto the scene, people are like, "Oh, premium's gonna die." It didn't die. It's still alive and well. So I see, and subscription games have been around since the 90s, right? Like EverQuest was a subscription game back in the day. So I think there's going to be space for premium games. Maybe in some ways it will get more difficult, but with the growth of the games market overall, now's a great time to be an indie developer and make games. Free-to-play games are going to be there. NFT and scarcity-based economy-based games, which will in some ways be spiritual successors to free-to-play games. These things will all have a place because user preferences are different. User motivations to play the games are different, and yeah, like some people like playing free to play, some people like subscription, some people like just straight up premium games.
Sure. So last one, I promise. Do we think that the movement towards subscription will help to preserve premium games, which I say would be the future, or do we think that premium games are under threat because of subscription thing, which I guess would be the fad? That doesn't make any sense. But A or B? Nobody knows. Okay. I wanted to leave a little time. Does anybody have any questions or any particular tech trend topic that they would like us to quickly run through before we wrap up?
So actually, most of my work is in M&A. So this is actually, so over the last 2 years, you've seen an incredible level of consolidation, right? I think there's multiple factors. One is with COVID, everyone was at home playing games, gaming revenue went up. A lot of other sectors, their revenue went down. So that caused the stock market prices of these gaming companies to bump. And then there were companies like Stillfront, Embracer, MTG, so they're able to go out and just buy up a bunch of companies. And then because they're so active buying, it pushes everyone else who maybe they were on the fence of buying to buy, or else they're going to miss out. So Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, if you look over the last 2 years, they've bought partner studios that they've been working together with for like 5-10 years, right? So why buy them all of a sudden now? Because Embracer and Stillfront were chasing them. Now so I'd say that's more the driver. unless you're someone like Xbox Game Pass, right? So for them, it's specifically because they want to buy content for Game Pass. And so they picked up Bethesda, they picked up a couple of other companies that had great content already. But you look at every single acquisition they've done, they've had a pool of IP and portfolio that they could throw into Game Pass. Whereas a lot of the other acquisitions, it was about either financial, so they were profitable, or what you're seeing now is it's gotten so competitive in terms of the just pure development capacity that people are just buying work for hire developers, which 3-4 years ago never would have happened. Okay, then you also have companies specifically like Keywords, Saber, Sumo, that their core business is work for hire, and so they're expanding those services, right? So one way to think about it is there was already a ton of interest in gaming as a whole, and then all of a sudden you have Web3 come in here with people with ridiculous amounts of money, and they have to fund all these games, and so any capacity that was already tapped, it's just getting bid up further and further. So on our side, what we're seeing is the challenge isn't that there's not enough buyers. I mean, there's not enough relevant targets.
We have 5 seconds to go. Anyone want to take it?
Well, very quickly. So, I mean, I'm also like working in a venture investment plus venture studio side. And I see, so 10 seconds, that passed, right? So,
We're in the red zone.
So with the right combination, like IP holders and then platform and then drama or game production, if we have like these entire end-to-end cycle, I think it'll become really beneficial for like each individual companies as a like one team. That's what I see as a possibility in this market.
You want one last word?
Sure. I guess just digital companies in general, they want to create platforms. They want to create places that people come back to over and over and over again. So we're seeing not only consolidation, but these growth of these gigantic platforms, because that's the only way that gets users in the door, and then these companies are able to shop those users around their different products. So that's, I mean, part of what Jim said.
One last thing I will say, I think it's good for the ecosystem because all this money is basically flowing out to the founders of those gaming companies. Many of them for gaming PCs, they invest in other companies. Also, when teams consolidate, creativity tends to decline, right? And so it gives you more room then for people who are starting new game companies to come out with innovative content and creative content to push the boundaries to then grow the market further. Yeah, okay, so because I come at from that angle, right? Because we are on the transaction side, but it's perfectly acceptable, and I think it's perfectly fine. People just want to build lifecycle businesses, and it turns out 50, 100K a year, and it's totally cool.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for sticking with us through a bit of lunchtime. Gentlemen, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thanks.